Part B.4, review Jdbc programming. Here, I cannot give you the whole Jdbc theory because we do not have that much time. But I can review the main points of Jdbc programming. So if you are not quite familiar with this part programming, so try to get you connect to this basic technique. Then later, when we use this technique, so you can quickly, understand the main steps of this technique. All right. Standard steps. So let me just go through the standard steps of this method. You can see pretty easy. You just follow step by step, then build up some experience, so then you can do it easily. The first step, DBMS drivers jar library file. When you choose a DBMS, so whatever you choose, MySQL or Oracle, after you choose that, you have to download. You search on web, have to download the driver's jar file corresponding to your particular DBMS. We use MySQL, so we download this driver's jar file. Okay. So I include it in my example. So you just use it directly. Step 2, load the driver before you do the programming. Load the driver in your Java class file, source code. So basically, you just put this sentence. This sentence, capital class dot fullname. So this way, we call it dynamic loading. So dynamic Java class loading. So why dynamic? Because at the compile time, that class, the driver's class, that class is not, get arranged for your application. Only at the runtime. So when this program executes at this line, then the JVM needs to go to your class path. Each application, you have some class path, right? So some specific location. For a web application, okay, a typical Java web application, these three places, when a Java class is loaded, only these three places will be, searched for automatically. So what are these? First, in your web app, suppose your web app, you have a web-inf, right? INF folder. Let me use more space. All right, let me use more space here. Suppose you have a web app, then web-inf / library. That is the first place. All the Java classes, including, typically the classes contained in the jar files. There will be searched and loaded. Okay. All right. So another same / classes compiled Java classes will also be searched, loaded. Yeah. All right. The third place, Tomcat. So here I use Tomcat. Suppose our server, Java server, in our Tomcat installation directory, there is a library folder. Yeah. So all the Java files in this location will be searched by your server, Yeah. Try to find the class needed. Yeah. Only these three places. Yeah. If you put your Java classes in some other places other than these three locations, the server cannot find them. The server cannot find them. Okay, all right. So these three locations we call class loader. Class loader. Or the class loader of server will load classes from these locations. Yeah. So when you hear the class loader name, yeah. So that's just some program inside the server try to locate appropriate Java class from these three locations, okay, and get them into JVM, okay, ready for doing things in your application. Yeah. All right, so that is the step number 2, dynamic loading. Number 3, make database connection. Now all your drivers classes are loaded, available, ready in the main memory. Yeah. Now you can use them. Yeah. How to create a database connection? Yeah, here. Yeah, let me show you this long line. Yeah. Driver manager. Yeah. So that's the class from the Java file, from this Java file. Okay. Yeah. From your library drivers. Yeah. This one is from the Java file. Okay. .get connection. Then URL of your database. URL. The protocol, Jdbc : MySQL. So then the domain name, port, database name, then username, password. Okay. So then a database connection object is created. That's the step 3. Step 4, do database queries. Do database queries. Yeah. To do database queries, there are 2 types of queries. The first type, select type. Select type. Then, other type, insert, update, and delete. Delete. Because the select type, you have returned the result. You need to process. For all these 3, no return the result. Okay, so you do not need to process a return result. Yeah. Next slide, I will explain this one. Yeah, because these 3 pretty easy, straightforward. Yeah, so we can, do it easily. Yeah, that select type. Yeah, you need to do a little more work. Yeah. So let me show you the main steps processing the select type Jdbc query. Yeah. So what are those things we need to do for a typical select type query? First, we need to declare some special, appropriate object. Here we use prepared statement, object, results. So what's the prepared statement? So here, in order to process the query, there are two ways you can use. One way is the statement. Statement is an interface. Prepared statement is sub-interface. So this is a Java interface. This one is sub-interface of the statement. Yeah. Prepared statement can do more work than statement. Yeah. So what's the more part? The more part, it can handle unknown parameters. But the statement, it cannot handle unknown parameters. All the values in the query statement must be known when you define the query statement. The prepared statement is better. Yeah. It allows you put unknown parameters when you define a query statement. Why it is good? Because there are many situations. At the development time, the data values are unknown. Many data values are unknown. Only at the runtime, after the user enters data, then you have those values. So in that situation, prepared statement supports that feature. Yeah. But in this example, we just display all the questions in our database. So we do not have the unknown parameter values. Okay. But later, sooner or later, we will have that kind of queries. Then I will explain how to do the Jdbc programming related to unknown parameters. Yeah. So I delayed that part, in some other videos. Yeah. All right, so let's continue. Yeah. Now we can define the query statement. Yeah. Now we have this prepared statement object. Okay. The prepared statement, how to create that object? Here we use the connection object. So we did before, called .prepare statement method, and then this is the definition of our query statement. Yeah. SQL query. Yeah. So you should have some SQL knowledge. Okay. SQL database, SQL query knowledge. Yeah. So you can, here, if you're not familiar with the SQL thing, SQL technology, so you can go to this place, w3schools.com to study. Yeah. Some simple tutorials for beginners. You can easily understand how to write simple SQL queries. Yeah. All right, so here there is one thing I want to point it out. Later, when you write your own SQL statements, you should be very careful. All right, so here, some of the SQL statements could be long, relatively long, right? So that means when we write our Java statement, sometimes if the statement is too long, for readability consideration, we may like to break it into multiple lines, right? So using the string concatenation symbol in an operator plus. Yeah. But when you do that, one little thing I want you to pay attention here. Look at here, there is a space. After this content, after this content, you can see there is a small space here. You need to put a space. Otherwise, if you forget to put a space, after concatenation, content and this from, there is no space between them, right? So you would, because that's the concatenation. Yeah. If you do not put a space, you will see content, no space, from, then MySQL, your DBMS cannot recognize, what's this? It's wrong. There is no keyword. There is nothing like this. So your query won't work. And in that situation, many times there is no error message. You only know something is wrong, but you do not know why it is wrong. In that situation, you may spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time. Here, this is my experience, from my own experience. So I want to point it out. Space. Next, now display the query result. You execute the query. Then the result get into this object, results, RS. So it's called result set object. Then the result is organized in a table with rows and columns. Okay, rows and columns. When you access rows, columns, you access row by row, row by row. Okay, row by row. But when you start from the first row. Okay, so why you call this .next? Next is the method of this object. It moves its cursor to the next available row. Next row. That's simple. Move the cursor, because when you read the data, you need to move the cursor to that row. All right. At the beginning, the cursor is point to before the first line. Okay. At the beginning, the cursor point ahead of the first line. Then, in the while loop, you call next method and move to the next row. That's the first line. Okay. Next row, first line. Every time you move to a new row, next line. Okay? But when you reach the last row, this is last row, then the next time you call it a point out of there is no line, right? Out of the data. If there's no line, it'll return false. Because nothing returned, it's false. There is something returned, it's true. Okay? All true. There is some data return, but no data return, false. So you get out of the while loop. All right. Then inside the while loop, you retrieve data for one row, one particular row. Okay. Now we store one row data in one Java Bean, this problem Java Bean. So we create the problem object. Then the problem Java Bean has several properties. Here we have two properties, PPID and a content, two properties. PPID, we get integer, get int. The first field, its type integer. This one corresponds to the first field, PID. Okay, PID. The first field name. Okay, all right. Get string, the second field, this 2 corresponds to the second field, content. Okay, so you read, you get a data, second field. Then you set it as your Java Bean property. Okay, after you get a Java Bean, store the data for that row, you put that to the prob list. Because we create that list object before, ahead of time. So you add using that add your Java bean into the list. All right. After you finish all the Java bean adding into the list for all the rows, for all these rows, the last step, request.set attribute under the proper list name, your data. This object contains all your data. Yeah. Request. Yeah. Request. Yeah. So in your servlet, this request is the HTTP request, HTTP servlet request object. TP servlet request object. Okay, the reference of that. In your do get do post method, you will get that object from there. Set attribute. In this way, you store your data in the request scope. If in the session scope, if you want to store your data in the session scope, you need to create a session object. Then session.set attribute. Yeah. If we have chance to use session, then I will explain that part. Yeah. Right now, we just use the request object in the request scope. All right, so that's part B.4, Jdbc programming. All right, so let me stop here. Yeah.